Well, welcome to Tim's Take, and today we have the pleasure of having Dr. Derek Brake over in the Division of Animal Science, and he's the assistant professor in ruminant nutrition.
Yes, sir.
And you and some of your colleagues just got a nice NIFA grant.
We sure did.
And not only, though, is it the animal science folks, you've got an engineer involved in this.
Yes, that's true.
So what the heck are engineers and animal scientists doing together?
Yeah, no, you need to find a good joke. I mean, the real joke's like what happens when a nutritionist, a geneticist, and an engineer all go into a bar. What happens, right? Like,
right.
I mean, I've figured out the answer to that. I'm not a very good comedian, but you know, really, the way we all ended up together, what we're all trying to work towards is find more efficient cattle. Come up with a way that really improves efficiency through the entire supply chain. Both for beef. It can extrapolate to some other things. What we're trying to do is we're really trying to capture the ability to measure some things that are hard to measure, but we know are what really drive ultimately the feed bill, or how much how much different cattle need to eat. And so functionally what we're trying to do is come up with a way to, in real time, measure the surface area of individual animals.
Not just weight.
No, not just weight.
Weight's easy.
Which is what we do. Yeah. So, in fact, what's exciting about this work is we know some of this stuff. The energy requirements of individual animals is really, really important to determining which animal needs more feed or less feed to stay alive, or which animal needs more feed or less feed to grow. So it drives our feed efficiency. Now, the folks who first figured this stuff out, this happened 100 years ago or more, that this was really getting figured out. And they understood that this was really related to surface area. Now, the problem, however, and what they recognized was it's really, really hard to measure surface area 100 years ago. And so they kind of threw their hands up in the air and they say, well, you know what, body weight, we could use that instead. We know that it's not as good, and we know that there's kind of some flaws to doing that. But we're willing to accept that because at the time, it's a heck of a lot easier to put a cow on a scale than it is to do a lot of different things to measure surface area. And nowadays, with the various sensors that have been created that integrate with computers every day, that are really integral in what they call robotic vision, it's actually quite easy to get what my engineering colleague calls the surface area of a three-dimensional, non-uniform, deformable object, which is what an engineer likes to call a cow. But what we're hoping to do is actually tie way back to all of that initial discovery work that was done and recognized, and quit, or maybe move away from, or add some more information to come up with a much more accurate way of identifying individual differences in efficiency, or ultimately of feed requirements of individual animals as they're moving through the supply chain, or as they exist in a farm. And then, you can feed that information back to producers, and they can make management decisions to try and optimize the value of those individuals. And then ultimately, you maybe make more efficient cattle in the long run. And this is where the geneticist comes in, where we can feed that information back. We can try and figure out some of these genetic mechanisms that correlate back to some of the bioenergetic requirements, and make improved mating decisions, and move the whole U.S. herd in the right direction.
So if you have an efficient animal, they're going to use less energy for maintenance, so they can put more of that into milk production, to growth, and everything. And when we get our forage analysis or grain analysis, we have net energy gain, maintenance, and lactation.
Yes, sir.
And TDN.
Yep, you got it.
But you said that net energy maintenance is the big one.
Net energy maintenance is what we use in all of our current models. So you talk to a nutritionist like me, that's the value that we're going to take, and we're going to use that to predict what your intake's going to be when the forage quality isn't so low that the size of the stomach is what literally limits how much they can eat. So we typically think that cattle eat to a common energy endpoint. Typically, we relate to that to net energy available for maintenance. Energy available, and also the body uses calories and other nutrients. They don't get used evenly for all processes. So essentially, every time cow eats something, the first piece of that is going to go first to stay alive. So
maintenance.
Maintenance.
Yes.
And so that's where that comes from. And so right off of the top, that portion of the feed is going to be used to meet that requirement. And then what's left, well, they take that piece out of that bin, and then that's going to be used for whatever it is we want them to do. Right? Grow, support a pregnancy, lactate, things that we actually, as cattle producers, capture value off of, right? So because those are the marketable products, right? Pounds of beef, pounds of calf per acre, pounds of milk per cow. And
so when we start seeing animals losing weight during the winter, they're not even getting the maintenance, are they?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's nested into a lot of beef production cycles. And that's not always a bad thing. So we talk a lot about when we're managing cows out in a pasture setting, we're really sensitive to looking at their body condition. And the reason why we talk about looking at their body condition is it's not a bad thing if we're coming off of summer grass, spring or fall grasses, and maybe she had a little bit extra, was able to eat a little bit over her maintenance energy requirements. She put on a little bit extra fat in body condition in there. And then what we ask her to do is we get into this time of the year, maybe a little bit further into January, February, the grass goes into a dormant state, the energy and protein value drop off. There's not as much out there for her to eat. And then so what she's going to do, when she goes below maintenance, she's going to access that energy that she stored up from earlier in the year in a pretty highly efficient process. That's why it's so stinking hard to lose weight sometimes, right?
Oh,
you gotta go to the gym.
I'm too efficient.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, right? Yeah, we're all rewarded for being efficient. That's the stink, and that's the problem, right? I mean, and so, anyways, that's pretty efficient. So we're okay with our cows losing body condition to a point. If they get too thin on us, then we'll run into some train wrecks when it comes time to breed them again.
Or she's pregnant. Is that okay if she's losing a little weight?
To a point. That's actually a good. That's great. That's a very researchable question. I work with some colleagues that are really interested in that, and so there's probably some things that aren't recognized, some influences of changing nutrition later in pregnancy that will influence the calf perhaps for its lifetime.
Right.
And so that's a great question. However, there's an awful lot of management practices where that's not being considered whether they ought to or not.
Right. Or like you said, or coming back into pregnancy. A
lot of things. When you're talking about the cow, a lot of it has to do with trajectories too. So sometimes it's not all absolute amounts, but kind of whether you're moving in the right direction or the wrong direction kind of deal. Because the body will kind of shut down. Things like if she's not getting enough groceries and it's a taxing process to achieve a subsequent pregnancy, make another calf. Well, all of a sudden we might decide biologically, it's a subconscious thing, but there's biological mechanisms that effectively influence so that we're going to prioritize using the limited amount of groceries we have to support the calf that's on the ground, or making milk to support that calf, or staying alive ourselves before we try and achieve another pregnancy.
Sure.
And so that's certainly a thing. So sometimes it's just as important, even though they might be thin, just getting them back into a place where they have a little bit of excess, because that'll trigger some things that'll help you basically end up with a better pregnancy rate, which is what you're after.
Sure. Now, you mentioned, we talked about net energy, but TDN is kind of that gross measurement that we can compare. Like you said earlier, if we're looking at hay, you can compare hays.
Sure. Yeah. So TDN is total digestible nutrients is what that typically refers to. It's a unitless value. It's actually percentages is what it's referred to. TDN, there was a big push, really in an extension and outreach effort in the mid 1900s, so about 1940 to 1960. There was between about the 40s and 60s, there was a big push to try and educate a bunch of producers that, hey, you ought to be looking at this because it plays, the energy content of different things plays an awful big role. in your feed costs, right? And differences in efficiency. And at the time, what was pushed was TDN. What we know now is the way TDN's calculated, it actually uses some, not to get too in the weeds, there's just some factors in there that it uses to kind of standardize some things that aren't always the same thing. So they're variable. So TDN's kind of one of those things, like 60% of the time it's right all the time. And so, but that being said, typically when you work within the same class of feed, it still works, right? So like if you do, I mean, you can use TDN still to rank hays.
Right. So
like,
if I'm buying tall fescue hay and you've got it 68 and I've got some 62, that 68 is going to be better.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we extrapolate that, I mean, now does that mean that it'd be does the nutritionist still want the net energy for maintenance and energy for gain so I can predict what the cows are going to do off of it? Yeah, absolutely. I want to know things like that. But that difference in TDN is probably also going to be the same difference or a very similar difference that you're going to see in net energy available for maintenance and energy available for gain, as long as you're within that similar nutrient, right? Like, or that similar feed type. Where you get into trouble is if all of a sudden, I want to say, well, okay, should I be feeding this 62 fescue hay versus TDN hay versus soybean hulls? Because now all of a sudden it's a little bit apples and oranges when you get into some stuff like that. And so that's where
the high protein.
Yeah. And so what you can do is you can get into the way to make better decisions there is to start using one of your net energy values when you want to do things like that, because the body basically handles excess protein differently. And so
we pee it out, don't we?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Well, it's the keto diet, right? I mean, that's the whole thing is and there's actually a higher caloric cost when you overeat protein. That's the whole concept behind the keto diet. You also need protein. So the closer you are to that protein requirement, well, there's a lesser energetic cost associated with overeating protein. So that's where, not to get really complex, but it really is like a sliding scale. And so when you move into different feed types, that's where kind of TDN isn't the best way to make your best feed purchases when you get into some things like that. That's where net energy maintenance and energy gain are better.
So people like me skip over those three and go right to that one easy one. I mean,
yeah, sure.
I do that a lot.
Yeah, you're not the only one.
So I really need to pay attention and compare those three that also get net energy gain, lactation, and maintenance. The other thing is I've heard extension agronomists say that energy is the hardest thing to get in the wintertime. It's the most expensive. Well, protein's easy. Energy's harder. Is that how animal scientists looks at it too?
So, yeah, I mean, energy is what drives the boat almost always.
Okay.
So, I mean, so a lot of the times when we're talking about cattle, energy is what drives all of the performance responses, all of the feed intake requirements once the animal's achieved puberty. Right. So, which is really close to weaning typically.
400 or 500 pounds.
Yeah. So it's somewhere in that 400 to 600 pounds is pretty common for when we'd classify that. Before then, protein's a lot closer in importance to calories. But what happens is some of these same guys that did some of the work that kind of figured out this relationship of energy requirements and surface area. Well, some of them also defined things like puberty to a guy who talks in bioenergetics. One way to define puberty is actually the point at which that next pound of gain, when there's a greater caloric amount of gain associated with adipose or fat than there is with protein. And so that's what happens as the animal matures. So as they get more physiological mature, a greater amount of gain becomes fat. And so
that's what happens in the feedlot.
Exactly, that's what happens in the feedlot. It actually happens a lot earlier than in the feedlot, but because of that, that's why calories are so important, because fat or adipose has about 225% the amount of calories in it than carbohydrates or protein to some extent. Probably closer to 200%, 180. But But anyways, it's much more caloric dense. And so because gain or composition of gain changes more towards adipose as the animal gets older, that's what makes calories so much more important. So a lot of the times when we talk about the multiple segments of the beef industry, that's why, well, and even when you want to go to the dairy and everything else, most of the animals that we're mostly focused on are post-pubescent animals. So the animal that stocker, backgrounder calf is typically at that point where they're starting to put more calories in gain for adipose than they are for lean tissue. The dairy cow's doing exactly that. Now they're a little bit of a different case because they're making milk. And so there's an awful lot of, that's actually a very efficient process to lactate. So they put a lot of those calories right directly into milk.
Yeah, sure. So, but what you're doing though is that you're looking at efficiency.
Yes, sir.
That we don't get too big of an animal, which is probably inefficient, or too small because you're not going to get the end product. And when we was talking about this, I was thinking, okay, yeah, like the doctor said, to lose weight, 2,000 calories a day for right now, you can lose weight. But as you lose weight, you have to have 1,800 calories.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So the same way with the animal.
Yeah, so it changes, and it changes as your shape changes too. That's part of the reason why this is so hard when it comes. And so you got to take multiple measures. If you have a way that you can easily capture this data in real time, because it becomes a moving mark. That's where some people might criticize maintenance energy requirements, is because they'll say, well, yeah, what he's saying is right. That's accurate. But the thing is it changes for tomorrow. Right. And so what the heck, I'm changing a moving, or I'm chasing a moving mark. It's like, well, if I've got an easy way to capture that on a day over day regular basis, well, I can continue to adjust things like that. But you're 100% correct. As your body size changes, so too does your caloric requirements. And it's really related to shape. So really what we're chasing here is we're kind of trying to chase the more spherical cow, because a sphere is typically has the optimal ratio of volume to surface area. And so if a cow or a feedlot steer or whatever has the same density, so there's the same pound of cow in per cubic meter, then a sphere will optimize the amount of cow with a minimal amount of surface area related to it. And so, in fact, that kind of represents itself so we use right now, because we haven't figured out a way previously to use surface area in a realistic way to measure these things. What we do instead is we measure body weight, right? And so the way what we do with body weight is we take body weight and then we take out the amount of that body weight that we think is associated with just digestive, that's in the digestive tract. That we call that shrunk body weight, and then we raise that to the 3/4 power, right, or the 0.75 power. So, and that's figured out. That's been figured out previously from a bunch of experiments that were done where people just looked at those relationships of energy, fasting or maintenance energy costs relative to body mass. If cattle were spheres, we'd raise it to the 2/3 power.
More efficient.
Yeah, and they'd be more efficient. Now, the problem is right now, when we do things on a body weight basis, I'll go get animals that are all the same body weight, and because that's how we market cattle. A lot of times it's just, I need a calf of this size or of this body weight, and it's presumably the same age, but we don't know that a lot of the times. And we know hide color. I mean, that's about, that's about it. So, I mean, I want heifers or steers, black or red hided, black, white face, whatever it is that a person wants to get. We know those things, and we know body weight. So I can work with buyers to get those animals, pretty within certain thresholds. The problem is when I close those cattle out, or if I look at their subsequent performance, when all other things are being equal, well, some of these animals are going to perform where they're going to need about 2 to 3. The cost to feed them might be 2 to 3 times less than other animals. Then they all seem to start in the same place. Well, that kind of really demonstrates some of the inefficiencies associated with doing things on a body weight basis.
So are we looking then at lower or higher surface area to be optimal?
So generally the surface, so we call it the law of surface area. So essentially we think that there's a fixed amount of caloric loss per square meter of surface area. So what you really want is you want that animal that has lesser surface area per unit body weight than the other way around, because the really cool thing about this, because energy is really important. We also know energy is conserved, and no more of it's getting made in the universe. And so you've got to get it from somewhere, and what you lose, you got to account for. And so effectively, warm-blooded critters like humans and cattle, we have to get energy every day from something else. And because we live in an environment that's typically cooler than our internal body temperature, that means we're radiating heat right now. So you've all seen this if you ever look at those FLIR cameras.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can always pick something out, a warm-blooded critter out against that, and that's because the surface temperature of the body is greater than the surrounding environment.
We're using energy.
Yeah.
So we think about muscling then. So a highly muscled animal is going to have two animals that weigh the same, but one's more muscled. They're going to have a lower surface area on the highly muscled one, probably.
Perhaps that gets into a composition again question, which is that's different. Maybe, but you probably could end up in a scenario where you get a lot more adipose in there.
Oh,
as well. Actually, the animal that has more adipose is going to be
fat,
more efficient. Yeah, or fat, because I mean the double-edged sword of that is that actually provides some insulative properties. Reduces heat loss and some things like that. That's ultimately where we really want to go with some of this stuff. Is we want to get towards. So what we know to date is this law. Like, what's pretty well accepted concept of this law of surface area, that basically the caloric requirements, which really drive the bus for feed efficiency and feed requirements, are directly proportional to the surface area of the body. However, we still see some variance even around that when we correct for that. And so the reason for that is because we see changes in what we think is different surfaces of the body lose heat at different rates. And we know things like this, so cattle that are more acclimated to higher heat tolerances and things like that, they have ways to dissipate heat.
The Brahmas.
The Brahman calf has got the big long ears.
Yes.
Has got larger navel a lot of the times. More excess skin around the brisket and some other parts of the surface. It's really increasing its surface area, and it's doing that so it can dissipate heat in the face of greater thermal stress or heat stresses.
So what you're doing, you mentioned that you saw your sons or somebody's game, and they were doing this 3D imaging. We could do that with cattle too.
Yeah. So what really got us thinking about this is I was having this conversation with some of my colleagues so my son likes to play video games, and back then he had an Xbox with an Xbox Connect, which is just a camera sensor on a game console, and essentially it works where you can play games, you move around, the camera kind of figures out how you move around, it moves the character around on the screen, kind of thing like that. And that's all fine and grand, but as we were setting that thing up for him, you have to go into this kind of back end system to calibrate the camera. And so when that happens, you actually, for some time, see what the camera is actually seeing in the environment. And so as we're calibrating this thing, I'm realizing this sensor is wrapping pretty well around the surfaces of his body in relationship to other things in the room, right? And it can clearly delineate him. And it's holy smokes, it's if you can just, that's a computer, and it's pretty easy if I can just have that computer capture that image and then take that image and then have it count the square centimeters, whatever. Now all of a sudden I've got a way to rapidly and hopefully pretty accurately measure surface area of, you could do that on him when he was calibrating it. And I was like, well, the real thing is they're using this for entertainment, video games. So, man, if we could do this we could put this stuff to work if we could actually use it in a meaningful sense to measure the surface area of a thing like a cow or really any other warm-blooded animal.
And you would do this all through their lives.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All through their life.
And that's And so what you can do, so essentially it's a snapshot in time, right? So if I essentially look at an animal, it's okay, well I have here's the surface area of that animal. Now I have a more accurate way than just using its body weight to figure out what its maintenance energy cost is. What that does is that tells me effectively how many pounds of feed. So if everybody's getting fed the same thing, how many pounds of feed the animal with higher caloric requirement is going to need more pounds of feed that it uses for maintenance, which is going to get used first, which means the amount of feed that's left over to support growth or lactation is less. And so functionally that's that animal that has that higher maintenance energy cost, and all things else are equal. It eats the same type of diet, then that animal is going to make less product per pound of feed that they eat. And so if we can identify those animals, then we can make management decisions with those animals, right? So like if we talk about like the growing beef calf, well, I can look at those animals and I can say, okay, well, this one has a higher surface area relative to its body mass right now. That means it's going to have higher energy costs. I can either change the type of diet that I'm going to feed it, or I might move it into different type of management systems that already have some inherent losses in efficiency. Maybe I move into like a grass fat program where the animal grows slower, but I'm not using some higher cost feeds associated with that I typically see in a confinement setting. So I can capture, maybe I can optimize values in those type of settings. Maybe I can go into a non-hormone kind of treated system where I also have some things that I give up, but maybe I have less to give up because that animal's already going to be a little bit less efficient. And what we can do is we can consistently measure this. Yeah. And ultimately we can get to a place where maybe we can even make informed marketing decisions, because a big challenge right now, if you move off of like a heifer and you go into just like, if you go to the terminal animal, identifying in providing information to producers in a way that allows them to accurately identify when that animal's effectively done growing, when I've reached physiological maturity or that highest carcass value. If I can do that within a pen setting, target that animal, and then subsequently market it, there's tremendous value in doing that right now, because a lot of ways that cattle are marketed right now is we optimize loads, and it's tedious and a lot of times our pen sizes are greater than a truckload. And so either pens are closed out, and so some animals that still had some grow left in them go, or I make them all go, but then some of those calves in that pen, well, they were done a couple weeks ago. So essentially,
and you waste a lot of money.
You waste a lot of money. They were eating feed, and they weren't really giving you much more back in carcass value or anything like that.
All right.